Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
This is Tiger Schmittendorf, Deputy Fire Coordinator for the Erie County Department of Emergency Services. You're listening to the SA Matters radio show with Dr. Rich Gassaway. The SA Matters mission is simple. They want to help us see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hello and welcome to episode 84 of the Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from Dallas, Texas, where I'm in town to deliver 2 situational awareness programs for the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Leadership Symposium. Thank you to the IAFC for this wonderful opportunity. I'm super excited to announce the release of my 3rd book in the Situational Awareness Matters series. This book contains 30 lessons for improving first responder situational awareness and decision-making under stress. If you're interested in purchasing this book, or any of my books or videos, head over to the samatters.com site and click on the store link. Have you experienced or witnessed a near miss and would like to have a platform to share your lessons learned with others? If so, please contact me by visiting samatters.com and clicking on the Contact Us link at the top of the homepage. Think about it for a moment. The lessons learned from your near-miss event could save the life of another responder. If you want to share your experience, contact me. Today's a really special episode, as I'm trying something new. A few months back, a tweet was posted on my social media feed from Captain Jason Nesbitt that included a picture of he and his crew as they were gathered around listening to an episode of SA Matters Radio as a training evolution. Well, I was so inspired by that I immediately contacted Jason and offered to do some personal training for he and his crew. They immediately jumped at the idea, and then I asked Jason if we could record the discussion and turn it into a podcast episode. And they were all in. So here we are, recording a discussion with the County of Grande Prairie Regional Fire Service C Platoon. Let's jump into the discussion. I'm not sure where this is going to go, but we'll find out together. So here I am with Jason Nesbitt and his crew from the County of Grande Prairie Fire Department. Regional Fire Service is the formal term. And Jason, let's start out by just giving your crew a chance to introduce themselves and say maybe what rank they have and how long they've been serving in the fire service.
All right. Well, I'll start with myself, and we'll forward it around here. I'm a captain, basically a shift supervisor. Served about 11 years now in the fire service. I've been in volunteer, paid call positions, and now a career position with 3 different municipalities. Been with the County of Grande Prairie for the last 4.5 years.
Okay.
I'm firefighter Mitchell Mann. I'm with the County Fire. I've been here for starting at 4 years now on the floor. This is my only fire department that I've been on.
Okay. And what's your first name again?
My name's Mitchell Mann.
Mitchell. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Thanks.
My name's Doug Porterfield, first class with the County of Grande Prairie Regional Fire Service. Previous, I was on volunteer department for a couple of years, and then forestry before that, so about 8 years altogether.
Okay, good. Thanks, Doug.
My name is Robin English. I've been a firefighter for the county for 3.5 years, and this is the only department I've been a part of.
Okay. Thanks, Robin.
My name is Jim Haslam. I've been in the county for a year and a half, and I was previously with the volunteer services in Ontario for 3.5 years.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jim.
My name is Joe Briere. I'm a county POC at the moment, also a fire chief in a neighboring municipality. I've been firefighting for approximately 13 years.
Okay, good. Welcome, Joe. Do I got everyone?
We got everyone.
Okay. All right, so how this came about was, and maybe everybody on your shift knows this or they don't, but you all were sitting around listening to one of the episodes of SA Matters Radio, and somebody shot a picture of it and put it up on social media and said, you know, we're listening to the radio show as a training session. And I was so impressed by that I immediately reached out to Jason and said, I so much appreciate the fact that you guys would do that and then share with others that you do it, because it kind of gives them the idea of doing things like that I'd like to get together with just your shift crew and just have a conversation or do a Q&A or whatever you guys would want to let this flow, but give you a very personal chance to have some very one-on-one time with me on any topic that you guys would like to discuss. And while there's no scripted agenda, I know Jason had sent in a couple of questions to me for things to think about based on some conversations that you all have had. We're certainly not bound to keeping to any script, but I'll just open it up and just say, you know, whoever's got something that they want to discuss or ask, let's just get the conversation rolling.
Okay, Mitch is stepping up to the phone here, so go ahead, Mitch.
All right, so my question for you was, what is the most appropriate way of maintaining control of your own personal situation when you show up on scene of a house fire and find out that it is owned and or occupied by either a family member, a loved one, ex-partner, friend, etc., in a situation where your awareness is beginning to become narrow-minded and tunnel-visioned? How would you proceed?
Yeah. Now, you all had sent me this question in advance, and when I read that question, the first thing I thought to myself is, wow, has that happened to you guys? You know, that you've shown up and on an incident scene that has had that kind of design to it, that it was for a family member or something like that. Has that happened?
I believe personally not to that extent. We have had members get into little fender benders on their way to work, but nothing crazy to the extent of like a house fire.
Yeah. Okay.
I can speak on personally, Rich. This is Jason here.
Yeah.
I'll just throw in there. I don't know if I shared with the guys before. When I started with my previous volunteer fire department, and it had been about 2007, we had a structure fire reported in the middle of the night, and go to the fire station muster, and reported the call. And upon arrival, my truck officer at the time, first words out of his mouth were, "Oh my God, I know these people," and the whole call just fell apart. Ended up with a fire on the back of the house, extended into the basement, and it was almost a hoarder house situation. And we're searching the house during a primary search, and we come out of the house and to find we still have active fire on the outside of the house. We don't have a hydrant hooked yet. The ball had been dropped pretty hard on that, and I think all because of that the friendship thing just flew in his mind right away, and his plan didn't come together. Mm-hmm. So, personal experience, that's certainly where I've seen an issue with it as well, and I think that's maybe how much is kind of leading into that, how that's getting into people's heads and making them make some poor decisions or not making decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate in that I've never had that happen to me. I've been on calls where I've, like medical calls where I've known the people, but I've never been on like a structure fire where I'd say, well, that's my family member, or even for one of my immediate neighbors. So as I offer up my perspective, it's not going to be based on experiences that I've had dealing with a situation like that. But I certainly can see that in a smaller community, where you've been raised in that community and went to school in that community, and most of the people you know and hang out with are from that community, how it raises the potential of going to a call where you're gonna know somebody, and probably know somebody really well because of how tight knit a smaller community can be. And I was raised in a smaller community. I was just fortunate that I've just never had what you describe as this stress scenario happen to me. So I will just kind of knock on wood and be glad that I haven't. But it raises a really good point about what happens to us under that type of stress when it is someone, let's just say, that we're related to, because that probably brings it into the one of the most stressful potential mindsets that we can get into is realizing that you pull up on a structure fire, and it's somebody that you have a very personal connection with. So essentially, what we would aspire to do is to prepare someone to be able to work through the emotions of that scenario and the stress of that scenario. And the best way to do that is to prepare for the potential of that scenario in advance of that scenario happening. In other words, one of the things that you could do is in your mind. So say, for example, you pull up to, as we're doing this in scenario kind of format, you could pull up in front of your own house. And pull up in front of your own house, or like when you're going home from shift, you pull up in front of your house and say, now, what would I do if I was on the fire truck and I pulled up and my house was on fire? What would be my priorities? What would be the things that I would want to give my attention to? Realizing that if we're going to do the best that we can for our loved one, then we have to be our best. We can't really afford to let ourselves fall to pieces, being one of a limited number of crew members arriving on the scene, be it 4, 5, or as Blessings would have it for you today, Jason, 6 on duty. It's going to take everyone's coordinated efforts as a team to accomplish the mission, and that includes the person who's impacted. Now, one of the things that you'll need to give consideration to is if you arrive on the scene and somebody just completely falls apart. Finding a way to set them out of the evolution, set them out of the task. If they're willing, sometimes they won't be willing, but if they're willing, to set them out, because they become such a liability, because they're not in the right mental frame to perform their best. And different people handle stress in different ways. Very. There's a wide variation as to how people handle stress. Somebody in that scenario under stress would step up and arguably do the best performance of their career. And stress compelled them to get laser focused and do their job the very best that they can, because they know that's the most good that they can do for their family member. Others might be just so consumed by the stress or so consumed by the loss that is occurring that they might just completely freeze up or lose their head and not be able to do anything. So if and truly, I guess you really wouldn't know how somebody's going to behave until they're really put into that scenario. I mean, they might know how they'd want to behave, they might think through how they're going to behave, but until they're truly in that scenario, I guess you really wouldn't know how anyone's going to behave. But one of the things that you can do to improve the possibility that the way they're going to behave is to do their best, is to do these first mental simulations. So pull up in front of your house and say, I pulled up on a fire truck, this is my house, it's on fire, and kind of play through in your mind the things that you would do. What would be your priorities? How would you coordinate with your crew? How would you perform whatever it is, the firefight or the rescue evolution, and play that scenario through in your mind. If you're taking it serious, if you're taking the mental simulation serious, that should be a very stressful exercise to go through, because you're literally playing in your mind the envisioned real firefight or real rescue of your immediate family. Another thing that you can do is when you're developing your training scenarios, whether you're doing a search and rescue drill or a fire attack drill at a burn building, you could set the scenario up such that when you pull up on the scene or simulate pulling up on the scene in the training scenario, that you throw in, Jason, this is your house. So now you have to manage through the actual hands-on training scenario as if the incident truly is the family member of someone on the crew. In other words, what you're doing is trying to, in advance of having it happen, get them in the mindset of that kind of stress. So if it does really happen, it's not the first time they've ever given thought of what would I do if my house was on fire and I pulled up. They've kind of rehearsed and mentally practiced through it in advance. I can't tell you for sure that it's gonna make a difference, because people react to stress in such different ways. But the only thing that I can say that would give them any hope would be to have lived that experience through training or mental simulation in advance of actually having to deal with it. So if it ever really did happen, they, at least in their mind, could say, okay, I've been through this. I've trained on this. This is my house. We did that exercise where the fire was my house. And that might be enough to keep their mind on the mission and on the task just by rehearsal. And the more realistic that rehearsal is, the more stressful that rehearsal is, the more likely the performance at the real event might mirror the performance during the training. So maybe not the very best answer, but it's the best answer that I can give you in preparing in advance for something like that to happen. That's a tough question. That question was sent to me and I went, whew, man, somebody's going for my jugular vein with that question.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, that's actually a personal fear of mine. I have friends, as well as ex-girlfriends, that live in our response area, and there have been times where, I go to their places and I'm thinking to myself exactly with you. Your advice is something I do daily when I'm running on treadmills. I think to myself, what am I going to do? And I actually use it as motivation to help me, push through that workout. But it's definitely something that I wouldn't say plagues me, but it bothers me a lot. And it's something that I do go through on a daily routine. So, it was a good question to ask because I wanted to know if there's anything else I could do. But
well, actually, it's pretty smart. I don't know if you're doing this on purpose, but it's pretty smart to be playing those scenarios through your mind while you're on the treadmill, because the treadmill gets the heart rate up. The heart rate up gets some stress hormones flowing through the body, and in that mindset of an elevated heart rate with stress hormones flowing, heart rate increased, respirations increased, and now you're playing the scenario through your mind. That actually makes the scenario more realistic because you're upping the stress while you're on the treadmill. So that's a really smart thing to do.
I find it works really well. I'm sure I'm not the only person that does it, but it's something I've done from the start, and yeah.
I like the spin you put on it, Rich, as well. With I think it all goes back to the train the way you play, and if you're going to be trying to make it as realistic as possible in training, then you're prepared to encounter the real situations. So I think that's certainly an aspect of this I can take away from this to add to crew training is finding that aspect of realism with that type of circumstance and maybe trying to include it in training evolutions from time to time.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I think back is in my experience, when I was on the scene of emergencies, I, for better or worse, tried to detach myself from the emotions of the tragedy. In other words, I tried not to think of the people suffering because I didn't want to, and at that time I didn't want to deal with that. I wanted to deal with just doing my job, just, going through the motions of water application or going through the motions of cutting the car up. And I tried not to let myself own the feelings of the victims, if that makes sense. And this particular question brings right into play what happens when you can't detach yourself from the emotions of the victim because you're tied to them, so to speak.
Thank you for answering that.
Sure. What else you guys got on your mind?
Hi, this is Doug.
Hi, Doug.
My question is, how can I hone my skills in relation to situational awareness? I'm asked to fill in the role of a truck officer from time to time, but it's not something that I get to practice very often in a real-life setting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if there's any tips on how can I work on that without actually being in that role?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I think that a couple points that I want to make to this. One is the importance of developing and maintaining situational awareness is one for everybody on the crew to do and not just for the officer. And I say that because I've actually been in the presence of firefighters who think that it's the job of the officer to develop and maintain the situational awareness, and it's the job of the firefighters just to follow the direction of the officer and do what the officer is guiding them to do. And to some extent that is true, that it's our job to be subordinate to the officer that we're working for, but it is actually possible for a subordinate to see things that the officer might be missing. And therefore, I tell firefighters, don't ever give your responsibility of developing and maintaining your own situational awareness away to someone else, because if their situational awareness ends up being impacted or eroded for some reason, it could impact you in a very grave way. So develop your own situational awareness and then kind of compare and contrast what you believe is going on to what they believe is going on. So with that in mind, I think that every firefighter arriving on the scene of an incident should perform some form of their own size up. Now, maybe the officer is the only one who does a full 360 walk around, but there is a size up to be performed by everyone as they arrive on the scene. Even if your job is just to be, I say just to be, that I don't want to downplay the nozzle person, but if your job is to be the nozzle person, that you form some situational awareness based on the information that you can gather from the perspective that the position that you're holding, and therefore I think that it's important for every firefighter to be trained on the basis of how to develop situational awareness, and that's a 3-part continuum. It's perception, which is using the senses to gather information. It's understanding. That understanding is taking the information gathered by the senses and comprehending the meaning of it. And then it's prediction. And prediction is being able to use kind of like your mind's eye or your imagination, and to look into the future and see the future outcome before it happens. So it's a 3-part continuum of perception, understanding, and prediction. And I think every firefighter on the scene of an incident should always be cycling that process through their mind of perception. The easy word for perception is paying attention. Always should be paying attention, and then trying to understand the meaning of what they're paying attention to, which is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, because there's a lot of things that can impact that. And then every firefighter should always be in their mind making some prediction of the future outcome based on whatever action they're performing. If I do this action and it's the right action, what should be the outcome of this action that I'm performing? What should I see or hear or feel or taste or smell? Hopefully not taste and smell too much on fire scenes, but what should I be seeing and hearing as a result of the action that I'm taking? So I think you could practice this process of situational awareness development no matter what role you're in, and then when you're in the officer's seat, you'll be much more rehearsed at it, and it should come to you easier. Now, one of the things that is going to be different from when you're in the firefighter seat versus when you're in the officer's seat is the more thorough size up. In other words, the officer would hopefully do a 360 walk around the structure before entry, or at least the decision of entry or not entering is made. And so the skill set of the information gathered to form understanding and make predictions is a little different from the officer versus the firefighter who only sees the front of the building or maybe 2 sides of the building. And that officer has to be assessing, essentially, as I use the example of a residential dwelling, an officer who's sizing up the situation is preparing to make a very, very important decision. And that first most important decision is go or no go. And that sets up everything else that we're going to do. And to help that first arriving officer make that go or no go decision, they have to assess some information. They have to gather some information to form understanding. And that information is really, from my point of view, a relatively short list. And it needs to be a short list, because if you get a long list, the brain gets overwhelmed. And once the brain gets overwhelmed, the ability to make any decision at all will become impaired. You can suffer from analysis paralysis by trying to assess too much information. So I've made what I call the short list of things to help an officer make that determination of go or no go. The first thing is smoke and fire. Put those 2 things together. Hard to have one without the other. Smoke and fire, and you're assessing the characteristics of smoke and fire, and there are 4 characteristics: color, volume, velocity, density. And once you understand that different types of smoke and different types of flames have different colors and volumes and velocities and densities, and you learn how to read that smoke, as Dave Dotson would teach us, that is an indicator of what's burning, how deep it's burning, where it's going to burn next, the potential for flashover. So that's really a critical part. The second is building construction. What's this building made out of? and decomposition. Those two things go together like peas and carrots. Building construction and decomposition. It's not just enough to know what the building is made out of. You have to understand how the building's decomposing under the stress of the fire. And the reason you want to know that is if it's heading in the direction of collapse, you want to be able to anticipate or predict, that's part of situational awareness, predicting the future, predict the collapse or the pending collapse before it happens. So building construction, decomposition. The third thing you want to assess is the speed at which conditions are changing. How fast are the conditions changing? And what helps you to predict that is the amount of fire and smoke and the density and the speed at which the fire and smoke is moving will help you to determine how quickly the building is decomposing under the stress of heat and fire. So you want to be thinking about the speed. How fast are the conditions changing? And they're usually not changing in a good way. They're changing, in a degrading way. And then the fourth thing is survivability profile of a victim, and that helps to drive the go or no-go decision as well. So what helps you decide the survivability of the victim is taking all the previous three criteria: smoke and fire conditions, building construction and decomposition, speed at which the conditions are changing. Can I and my crew that I have here and now, with whatever water or resources I have with me here and now, should we go? And if we go, how are we going to go? Where are we going to go? And what's the quickest way to get to the victim to try to save them? Now, sometimes that decision should be no-go. It's not exactly how we train, but it's the truth. And if every firefighter, if everybody on Jason's crew had in their mind that when you all arrive, while Jason might be the officer and therefore the primary person doing this, everybody on the crew could be assessing those four criteria. And it changes the whole perspective for the entire crew, because no longer is the perspective of the crew, let's pull a line, go in, kick butt, take names, and save everybody. The crew's going to say, wait a minute, before we go inside and kick butt and take names, let's assess the smoke and fire conditions, the building construction and decomposition, the speed at which these conditions are changing, and do we even have the possibility of a savable life in here? And then the whole crew is looking at this from the perspective of managing the risk of the entry decision or the no entry decision. And this could be done really by every firefighter on every call. I mean, maybe not to the extent that the officer could do it if they do the 360, but the rest of the crew doesn't. But even from the front side, the crew can be making some inferences about smoke and fire, building construction, decomposition, speed of change, and survivability. And that way, if conditions aren't real good and the officer comes back around after the 360 and says, I don't think we should go in, the crew is of the same mindset, hopefully, because they're seeing some of the same things that the officer is seeing and sensing as well. And therefore probably more likely to even support the decision if the decision is made to be no-go. That's a long answer to a short question, so I'm going to pause and see if you have any follow-ups or anything that I wasn't clear with.
No, that was really good. And you know what? My question was kind of broad-ended. After you explaining everything, I think I need work on my comprehension and predicting, and that's where I find I have some rust or difficulties with, and gives me a bit of stress. So I think you're comparing and contrasting with my officer.
Yeah.
What they think, what I think. Sometimes it has to be after the call. I think would help me with that. And no, that was pretty good.
Okay. Good. When you self-identify the need for help in comprehension and prediction, you are spot on accurate for truly where most firefighters and many fire officers are as well. Is they're pretty good at perception. They're pretty good at seeing what's going on, but not always, especially in the moment of stress, really talented at understanding what the meaning is of what they're seeing. I see this, but what does it mean? And where is this incident going? And how long is it going to take to get there? And can my crew go faster than the incident is degrading? And if officers were really good at this, we'd find ourselves not getting ourselves into the tight spots that we sometimes get ourselves in, because we would have seen the tight spot coming before we even got ourselves in the tight spot. And experience helps with that. You think about your teenager, or when you were a teenager, all the dumb things we did because we didn't know any better. But as we did those dumb things and we learned, or maybe our parents tried to influence us to be smarter about how we do things, then it was easier for us to see and predict bad outcomes before they happened. But hopefully, as firefighters, we can learn that from experienced people. We can learn it from reading casualty reports, seeing the bad things that happened to people who in the moment thought they were doing something good or something smart, but it didn't turn out that way. And learning from that, we can comprehend a lot when we're reading the case studies of how other firefighters are dying. And part of the comprehension is, how can I understand what's going on, but they can't? They didn't. It's so clear to me because, of course, it's after the fact and you're not living through the stress of the incident. But how can you comprehend what they couldn't? What were the barriers? What were keeping them from being able to understand the meaning of what was happening? And why did they go down this path when it seems so after the fact? It seems so clear that going down that path would lead to a bad outcome. What compelled them to think that was the right thing to do? And I assure you that it wasn't that they were just doing something dumb. I mean, that's the default criticism. Look at the dumb things that they were doing. Whatever they were doing at that time didn't seem dumb to them. It seemed like the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. So you can develop your comprehension and prediction abilities by using the past experiences of case studies to allow you to see how clues mean something can mean different things in the moment, and then allowing you to make predictions of outcomes as you're going through those cases can actually build a strong cadre or a strong collection of experiences that in the moment can be very helpful to you when it comes to making future predictions.
I think you hit it spot on. I compare my forestry experience with my structural, and really strong with my comprehension predicting. And then with my structural, need some work on it. And how you say, why are they doing that? It goes through my head sometimes, but or why they didn't have us see it. But I'm sure people do that sometimes with the structural side with me.
Well, when you're asking that question, instead of asking, what were they thinking? What were they thinking when they did that? Because chances are they probably weren't thinking. They were probably like almost in automatic mode and doing things based on training, but not without a lot of conscious thought. So instead of asking, what were they thinking, ask yourself this question: why did what they were doing at the time things went wrong seem like the right thing to be doing? What compelled them to think that was the right thing to do? And some of the answers can get us very uneasy, because then we start to see, wow, I guess I could have thought the same thing. I guess I could have had myself in the same situation. Now that I've taken time to understand the mindset of why they were doing what they were doing, after we do that, they're unsensible things don't seem so unsensible anymore. We start to get scared because we say, wow, I could very well have found myself in a very similar situation. Any others?
Hi, Dr. Gasaway.
Hi.
I just want to say thanks for taking the time to sit down with us and answer some questions.
Sure. Who is this?
This is Robin.
Oh, hi, Robin.
And I guess it's not really a question, but I wondered if you could elaborate on task fixation and behavioral modification with regards to helmet cams.
Oh, yeah. I recently wrote about that. First of all, do you all use helmet cams?
No, there's one or two guys that have them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're neat.
Yeah, a helmet cam certainly can give you it will give you, not can, will give you a different perspective about what is happening, because the helmet cam will catch things that the eye does not comprehend, or the eye will not see, or the eye sees it but the brain doesn't comprehend it in the moment. So anytime you watch a video after the fact, you will see things that you don't think you saw. You might have seen them, but you didn't understand them. And you'll see things differently. So to that extent, a helmet camera can be an asset. The concern that I have about people who use helmet cameras is that if, for some people, once you put on a helmet camera and you are consciously aware of the fact that you are being video recorded, in other words, I wouldn't have this concern if we could somehow secretly put helmet cameras on people, but once you have a conscious awareness of the fact that you're being recorded, it can impact how you do what you do from a couple different perspectives. One is anytime somebody knows they're being recorded, audio or video, they're likely to be much more guarded about what they say or what they do because they know they're being recorded, which then the recording could be used as evidence. So that could cause one package of concerns, is that the person whose behavior is modified because of the awareness that they're being recorded. Another concern is that if a person has a camera that is recording, that it might compel them to do things that they otherwise might not do, because it's going to create an opportunity to make some good footage. And I believe there is the potential for that to compel them to take some risk that they otherwise might not take, because the camera's going to catch them doing heroic things, and boy, it could end up being on social media. It could end up becoming a viral video, and this could be on the mind of somebody, that the camera is going to record me doing something, and therefore I want to make sure that I get, that I do good footage. And I recently did a article on the SA Matters blog about helmet cameras, and one of the this is a conversation I've had with a number of people, because I think what causes them to bring it up is I think they know kind of intuitively that there could be the potential for some problems with when helmet cameras are being used. So they ask me about this a lot. But one of the things that I wrote about in the blog is that my son got a GoPro as a gift. I don't remember if it was a birthday present or a Christmas present one year, but he mounted that GoPro camera onto the helmet of his snowboarding helmet. And when he did that, and then I went snowboarding with, I'm a skier, but he was snowboarding with his friends, I noticed that they were doing things to play to the camera. They'd say, in other words, turn the camera on because I'm going to try to do a 360 flip on this jump, and I want to make sure that we get it on video, or I'm going to do this rail, or I'm going to do a 360 spin, whatever. They were taking these risks with the awareness of the fact that the camera was going to catch this activity. Well, as it would happen, this one particular time that we were skiing, I had broke off from them, and I was doing, because they do train parks, and not much to do for me in skiing and train parks because I'm a little too conservative to do any kind of trickery on my skis in a terrain park. But they're in a terrain park and they're doing their trickery, so I go off and I'm skiing somewhere else. And while I'm off skiing, one of my son's friends says, turn the camera on. I'm going to do a 360 jump off of this ramp. And I wanted to get it on film. Well, he didn't do a 360. He only did about a 300, which meant he landed square flat on his face. And when he landed on his face, he cracked. He broke his cheekbone. He cracked the orbit of his eye. And one of the very first things he said, when he come to the halt of sliding, face first for 30 or 40 feet till he stopped, as he sat up and he said, "Did you get that on the GoPro?" Without even seeming concerned of the fact that he just obliterated the side of his face. He wanted to make sure that it was caught on the camera. And when I watched the video of this happen and saw him say this, it just kind of came to my mind. I wonder if there are firefighters who could be doing the same thing, taking these risks because they want to make sure that it's caught on the camera. And unfortunately, I've seen some GoPro video of fire scenes on the internet that I can't say if they'd behave that way if the camera wasn't on, but I can say what the camera caught were things that I thought were risk beyond needed risk. In other words, they went beyond assuming risk and they were creating risk. And I'm not sure necessarily that it was because the camera was on or it's how they would behave otherwise, but I can't help think that in some scenarios the camera causes people to fixate on doing things that are going to make for good camera footage instead of doing things that otherwise might be best practice. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that was good. I personally like the idea of the for training purposes, but I can totally understand how people would get caught up in the moment, looking for the best shot, taking risks that aren't needed.
Mm-hmm. If you're on a training ground, it's a little easier to control the risks on a training ground and to do things the best practice, and then use that video to kind of do the playback. But on the uncontrolled, unpredictable, real fire scene, where you can't say, let's stop the evolution and regroup because what we're doing here isn't safe. You can't do that on the real fire ground. I think that there is the potential for some training benefit to come for having a helmet camera on, but I think there's also the potential for having some behaviors that are playing to the fact that it's being recorded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Good question. Good question.
I appreciate the answer. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. What else?
I'll switch back here. It's Jason again here. Just wanted to split the topic, and I think Doug got into it a bit there. And part of my interest is the situational awareness affecting incident commander. A large event or a showy fire. I like to discuss with my guys when we're doing training and size-ups, not to get caught off guard when you're getting to a call. And the big thing is, you're a firefighter. Don't be surprised to see fire. And I think we've all been there. Anybody in the fire service, I think, experienced that, especially when you're a new firefighter, getting to a scene and getting kind of overwhelmed by the event or what's going on with it. And over time, you develop those skills and experiences to manage that reaction to those events. But I think as time goes on too, sometimes you get caught off guard with your complacency, and just maybe looking for a little more perspective of that. I think I've an example for last year for myself where I got caught off guard a little bit with one. So just looking for a little more take or delving into that area of, how is your mind reacting to what you're seeing and falling back on past experiences or going into panic mode and trying to manage that.
Mm-hmm. Great question, Jason. When I was newer as a responder, and I think this advice probably even came to me before I was even an officer, and I was serving as a paramedic, and we had a rescue vehicle that would respond to vehicle accidents and different kinds of rescues as well. And a very experienced responder, the kind of person who was just unflappable, just nothing ever seemed to faze him, gave me a piece of advice that worked for me well throughout my whole career. And that was, when you get, he told me, Rich, when you get dispatched to a call, envision the worst possible scenario that you can be responding to. If you're going to a car wreck, everyone's trapped. Children are involved. Someone might be decapitated. The car's going to be over an embankment, teetering. Getting the worst possible scenario that I can imagine in my mind, playing through my mind, as he said, would mentally prepare me so that if I arrived on the scene and it was that bad, then I had already got myself in the mindset that I was going to be dealing with something that was that bad. So after he taught me how to do this, I rarely got caught off guard, because I would arrive on the scene, and most of the time, the scenario that I arrived to wasn't as bad as the one that I had envisioned that I was responding to. So like if you're going to a fire alarm activation, dispatch dispatches you for a fire alarm activation, at the Tim Hortons, and it's a Tim Hortons that you've gone to for fire alarm activations 30 times because they have some kind of alarm problem with their system and they just can't seem to get it worked out. Then boom, here you are going to another fire alarm to the Tim Hortons. Well, what I would say, employing that piece of advice that my friend gave me, is to not get on the truck and say, okay, this is false alarm number 32 to the Tim Hortons, but get on the fire truck and say, it came in as a false alarm, but it's probably going to be a working fire that started in the kitchen, and we're probably going to have patrons that are trapped, and we're going to have a well-involved fire when we get on the scene, and we're probably going to have a car parked in front of the fire hydrant, so we might have trouble getting water supply, and whatever, and whatever, and whatever. And play through the mind the worst possible case scenario that you could imagine. And then when you get on the scene, if it is a working fire, you're not surprised by it. You're like, that's totally what I expected. I expected to see a working fire. We should never respond to a report of any alarm or any type of fire and get on the scene and be surprised that we have a working fire. I mean, that's probably the worst possible form of complacency that we can have, is to think that we just went lights and sirens to something that we have already preconceived in our mind is going to be a false alarm, and we're maybe frustrated because it's in the middle of the night, or it disrupted our hockey game that we were watching, or it's disrupted us eating dinner, and let's get it reset so we can get back as quick as we can. That we take the mindset that every call that we're going to is a bad situation, and just get that mental set of the bad things we're going to see when we get there. So when you get there and it is bad, you're not nearly as caught off guard or surprised by that. It is completely what you expected to see, and that really worked well for me throughout my whole career. And I truly wasn't to the point where I never went to any fire alarm that I thought, this is just going to be another fire alarm. Every fire alarm I went to, after I learned how to do this, every fire alarm I went to was a working fire. And then when I got there and it wasn't a working fire, okay, I can stand down. But for the few times, and there wasn't a whole lot of times when a fire alarm ended up being a working fire that we didn't have, additional multiple callers, but it happened a few times. But I was never surprised because I fully expected to see a working fire when I got there, and it set my mindset up right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's some great advice. I certainly have some aspects of that I like to employ when we go to commercial alarms and things like that, where we're taking the time to lay out lines to hook up into sprinkler systems, grabbing hose packs, that type of thing, treating it as obviously the real thing, and keeping guys prepared for that. I certainly like the advice of the alarm. That's, honestly, that's where I got myself into last year, maybe for only about 10 seconds, but 10 years ago when the false alarms finally snuck up on me at 2:30 in the morning, and you're going to the residential monitored alarm that you've been to 100 over the last year, and as you come around the corner, holy cow, there's smoke, we got a fire. And caught off guard by my own rule, I try and preach to other people on not being surprised to see fire. Mm-hmm. So, just leaving you off in the moment for, 10, 15 seconds where you're trying to get your head around that and trying to get your game back together, and it was fine, everything worked out, and it was no major problem, but still to kind of trip yourself up like that, and I think that's some great advice is to take that and try and imagine the worst case scenario, and then you really will hopefully never truly surprised to see what you see when you arrive at an incident.
Well, the only time that I can remember after I started employing that I truly was ever after that caught off guard is we were dispatched for a fire alarm activation in a motel. And it was in the middle of the night, and I was an active responder in my department. Even though I was the chief, we had take-home vehicles, and we responded to calls. And I responded to this fire alarm, and going there with a fully expectation that I was going to have a working fire. Well, we ended up getting there, and there was a fire, but it was a very, very small fire. It was an unattended charcoal grill that they had set outside on a wooden balcony and set the grill right on the wood, and so it kind of caught the banister on fire a little bit. Not a big deal fire by any means. Then I wasn't caught off guard by that. When I was returning back home from that call, our neighboring community was dispatched for a detached garage fire. And that address, that street, was only just a few blocks away from where I was returning from the to the motel call. So I thought, well, heck, I'm just a couple blocks away. I can zip over there and at least see if it's working or not. And we shared the same dispatch, and let dispatch know, and they could let the responding companies know. And while I knew the main street, I didn't know much about the side streets off of the main street because it wasn't our community. And I went down to the main street, and I come to the cross street, and I turned down the cross street, and I was coming down the cross street to the address, and there was a guy standing out at the street waving his arms. And so I could see the house, but I couldn't see anything on fire until I pulled past the house, and the driveway was on the right side of the house, and the driveway went around to the back of the house, and detached behind the house was a garage, and it was on fire. And as I pulled down past the house and looked up the driveway, I could see the garage, and I could see that it was on fire. But then, beyond the garage, through the backyards, on the next street over, was another house on fire. And I wasn't ready for that. I had to wrap my mind around what. At first I thought it's a reflection. Somehow, like in my mind, there's a big mirror out there, and somehow something is reflecting the fire of this garage and giving me the appearance that there is a house on fire on the next street. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. I was so caught off guard. I couldn't even talk on the radio. I mean, I got that flustered. I couldn't even figure out how to tell dispatch that I had two fires instead of one, and I didn't even know the name of the street that was that next street over to tell them where that fire was. So I left, much to the anxiousness of the owner of the garage, who had a vintage Corvette in the garage. I left that scene to drive around the block to the address of the next fire to get the name of the street and the house number for the next fire, the other fire. And that's, as I say, as you're going to a call, prepare. Well, I was going to that call. I was mentally preparing for myself for a detached garage fire, which in my mental preparation, okay, it's probably going to spread to the house before I get there. So I'm probably going to have a garage on fire and then a house exposure on fire, and it's in the middle of the night, so the occupants may not even know it, and and I'm going to have potential for rescues, and I'm going to get there first, well ahead of any fire apparatus. And I'm playing this whole scenario in my mind of this worst case event, and then the worst case was not the worst case. The worst case was worse than the worst case, because the detached garage was nothing of the concern of that house that was on fire on the next street over. And here it ended up being arson, and the arsonist set the garage on fire and the house on fire on the next street. And, of course, at the moment you don't know that, but here I am thinking, okay, I got this garage fire, I can handle this, and now I've got a garage fire and a house fire. And I was caught way off guard, way underprepared for that. And that's the only time I can think that I was, ill-prepared even after practicing my preparation for worst-case scenario.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. What are the odds, literally, of something like that? But in the context of the arsonist, it makes perfect sense, and totally within the realms of possibilities. So.
Oh yeah,
but
completely.
Overall, I think some great advice for anybody listening on that is just to come up with that picture. And next garage fire, I'll be throwing that one in the back of my head, and we'll see how that works out.
Good. Well, fellas, we're at a little over an hour, and I try to keep the podcast show to about an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show, and then I'll turn the recorder off, and then I'll hang around if you guys got more that you want to talk with. So just as far as the sake of the show goes, I want to say thanks, all of you, for being on the show and giving me a chance to spend a little time with you and to address a few of your questions and to talk about these things that are topics that I'm very passionate about. So I'm so excited to be able to share this with you on a very personal level, but then be able to record it and share it with the listeners on a bigger scale. And thanks to all of you for giving me the gift of that time to spend with you today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gasway. I really appreciate you taking the opportunity to reach out to our crew here up in wintry northern Alberta right now. It's it's a nice change of pace for some of our training sessions on shift, and it certainly puts some different ideas in the heads of our folks here. I'm sure that'll be taking stuff back to our other folks in the department and on various fire scenes we're around. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time with you.
Thank you to Jason Nesbitt and your crew for sharing some of your afternoon with me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Before I close out today's episode, I want to take a moment to thank the departments and the organizations that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters tour stops. Your efforts to bring this valuable and powerful training on situational awareness and high-risk, high-consequence decision-making to your members and to others in your region are greatly appreciated. The Lake County Fire Chiefs Association hosted the program in Concord, Ohio. The Managerial Association of Emergency Services hosted two programs, one in Bradenton and one in Northport, Florida. The International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officer Section Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And of course, where I am now, the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Leadership Seminar in Dallas, Texas. If you're interested in attending an upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop, you can join me on December 1 at the M-STEP Conference in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, December 5 and 6 at the Scott Township Fire Department in Evansville, Indiana. And this is the fourth time Scott Township has hosted a tour stop, so thank you for that. December 8th, the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Development Symposium in Phoenix, Arizona. December 14th, the SBM Fire Department in Spring Lake Park, Minnesota. December 28th, the Peters Township Fire Department in McMurray, Pennsylvania. December 29th, the Swissvale Fire Department in Swissvale, Pennsylvania. January 5 and 6, the Savage Fire Department in Savage, Minnesota. January 8 and 10, the Utah Winter Fire School in St. George, Utah. January 13th, the University of North Carolina, Charlotte Fire and Emergency Services Leadership Institute. January 16th, the Iosco County Firefighters Association in East Tawas, Michigan. January 23 and 24, the South Carolina Firefighters Association in Columbia, South Carolina. If you're interested in attending an upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop, head over to the SA Matters website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. Here's hoping there's a tour stop near you and we'll get a chance to meet up. If you're interested in hosting a Situational Awareness Matters tour stop program in 2016 for your department or association, contact me through the website and we'll get something set up. Just click the Contact Us link on the homepage. If you're not a member of the SA Matters community of learners yet, please consider joining. There are more than 5,000 members connected here on SA Matters, sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to train our members to be critical thinkers and resilient problem solvers. Membership is free, and when you sign up, I'll send you a special report that I've created for the new members called 25 Best Practices for Improving First Responders Safety. So if you're not a member yet, head over to the SA Matters website, click on the red box on the right side of the homepage, the red one that says free membership. As a reminder, every episode of the SA Matters radio show has a corresponding show notes page on the samatters.com website. All the most recent episodes scroll on the homepage, but for older episodes, you can go to samatters.com / and enter the episode number, which I always mention at the start of each show. So, for example, if you wanted to access, say, episode 60, you'd open an internet browser, type www.samatters.com / 60, and that'll take you to the page that contains the link to that episode. The show notes page contains additional information and resources about the episode, and depending on who the guest is, there may be some photographs, video, and or audio of incidents, and contact information for the guests. On the show notes page, you can also ask me questions and leave your feedback on the episode. If you want to get connected with me on social media, you can get connected on Twitter by following @RichGasaway, spelling last name Gasaway, @RichGasaway, or @SA Matters on Twitter. The SA Matters community is more than 16,000 followers strong, and thank you for everyone who supports my mission on Twitter. You can get connected with me on Periscope by following @RichGasaway, and you'll get notifications of upcoming short video presentations that I'm doing on Periscope. You can also get connected on the Facebook private page. You can do that by going to facebook.com /groups /SA Matters. And I've got a really good discount running for the group members who've signed up for the private group, which is free, by the way. You can get 50% off on my new book, and the discount code is on the page. So sign up, get the discount code. On LinkedIn, you can find me by searching Rich Gasaway on LinkedIn. And thanks to everyone for connecting with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I really appreciate your support there, too. If you like the show, please consider going over to iTunes or Stitcher Radio and subscribing. You do that by searching for SA Matters Radio, SA Matters Radio. Please consider leaving me some feedback while you're there. And if you like the show, I'd really appreciate it if you'd give it a 5-star review. Not only will that motivate me to work harder for you, but it'll also help others to find the show. Well, that's it. Episode 84 is complete. Thank you again to my guests, the crew of the Grande Prairie Regional Fire Service in Alberta. Thank you to our sponsor, Midwest Fire. And thank you to our live event hosts. And finally, thank you to our listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gasaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgasaway.com.